What's up, and welcome back to Nowstalgia Pod, giving you your weekly quarantine episode. Dave, we're on, I think, week 9, 10?
Think so, yeah. 60
Yeah.
something days in the bag.
And we're still going strong because that content keeps churning out. We've been dropping episodes during this quarantine way before. So if you want to listen to those, go to youtube.com/nostalgiapod, soundcloud.com/nostalgiapod. And also giving us a follow or subscription on iTunes, and a rating and review is always appreciated, as well as Twitter at NostalgiaPod. Dave, we don't have an Instagram, but if we did, I wonder if we would have been one of the 2 million people that logged on to Tekashi 69's Instagram Live the other day, smashing Tory Lanez record of 350,000 viewers. Now, 6ix9ine obviously very famous, become a meme in the last year for ratting out all of his friends or all of his associates of his gang in order to get a reduced sentence. And this was his first public. Was he just released? Is that the case?
He's out on house arrest due to the coronavirus.
I saw
it would have been August, I think, normally.
I saw that they had to already move him because of this. Like he kind of either dropped his address, people were able to figure it out, so now they had to move him again. Just complete idiocy.
One of his neighbors posted this video. She saw 6ix9ine on his porch taking the photos that you saw him taking on the porch, and it's like obviously she knows where he lives now, and she put that up, and then they had to move him because discretion is not in 6ix9ine's MO. And judging by this comeback and the comeback song, he's just trying to double down and ride it out. And the song is doing huge numbers because people are engaged, and as long as you pay attention, it sounds like that'll continue to be the case. So still kind of crazy, but he's back.
Yeah, it's kind of nuts that he comes out and people are so into this. I mean, pretty obvious that he is a maybe not such a great person. It seems to not be a super loyal person, looking out only for himself, but still people are very into at least the drama surrounding him and interested in his comeback. Did anything else come out of this Instagram Live that's noteworthy for 6ix9ine?
Oh, no, I don't think so. It's just that one track, Gooba, that he debuted with the video and stuff. And I'm just curious to see if the tide starts to turn now that we have all these numbers and, at least for the moment, confirmation that there's still an appetite for 6ix9ine's music in terms of people in the music industry collaborating with him. Obviously, he'll have label support because they're only loyal to the money that he can still make. But you hear a lot of OGs like 50 Cent, who he used to be close with, and Snoop Dogg. All those people always discredit him, disowned him, and a lot of New York artists have. And there really hasn't been anyone to defend 6ix9ine in this regard. I'm just curious if that's going to change, maybe with some younger artists, people closer to his age, just seeing the ability to chase success with him, because it appears that a lot of his young fans either don't care about that or just don't really mind because he's a joker and a meme anyway. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, it's just getting started once again. So that's crazy shit, man.
Yeah. We were talking before we jumped on, and I know Lil Tjay was, I think, claiming to be the king of New York City, but taking some shots at 6ix9ine as well as A Boogie. Is that right?
That is correct, yes. Curiously, Lil Tjay was only doing this as he's promoting a new mixtape, State of Emergency, which is out now. But yeah, Lil Tjay getting a little out of pocket, sending some shots about his status in the game, in the New York rap game. I thought that was just kind of funny. And he started having some back and forths with Don Q, another New York rapper who's like A Boogie's right-hand man. And 6ix9ine has not commented on as far as I know, but yeah, kind of interesting. But Lil Tjay, we just talked about him. I think he had a really strong feature collab with 5 Foreign on Ambition. Really liked that track. He also was really good on Mannequin with Pop Smoke on Meet the Woo 2. And in general, just been a really rising quite fast. similar sound to A Boogie. Definitely will make XXL Freshman this year. But yeah, the State of Emergency project, hot off the October release of his debut album, True to Myself. It's a pretty quick turnaround. But yeah, this is not the project you're supposed to release after calling yourself the King of New York. I think that is abundantly clear. So, did you agree? Did this do anything for you?
You know, Dave, when I first log in, especially to these albums that I'm listening to talk about on the pod, but maybe I wouldn't normally be listening to, I usually check to see, okay, what am I getting myself in for? Is this a quick project? Am I in for a long Drake-like marathon?
Cost benefit analysis.
Yeah, and I saw 7 songs, 22 minutes on the Spotify app, and I was like, ooh, quick listen, right up my alley. By the middle of the album, I think it was about song 4, I could not believe I still had 3 more songs to go. I found this to be incredibly disappointing because I think the couple of tracks I've heard with Lil Tjay, he usually brings it, and I'm impressed with him. And this was just dull. I found a lot of it very samey, except for maybe the track with Pop Smoke, which seemed like an obvious like attempt at catching some of that this drill hype right now.
Yep.
But otherwise, man, I mean, I guess like My City jumps out as a track that is a bit more engaging, but overall it's like, oof, tough stuff. And the thing is, he carries what one song on this by himself. The rest are all collabs with other people. Mm-hmm. Not usually a good sign for a young artist to not be putting stuff out on their own, especially, I mean, maybe the singles are collaborations, and that's understandable. You get more fans who like individual artists hearing these other songs, but on an album or a mixtape, not hearing more songs that are just him is a little bit worrisome. You didn't like it either, so what didn't you like about it?
Yeah, I mean, to his credit, the last album from last year was primarily him solo. But yeah, TJ does not make a strong impression on this at all. I think the biggest moments are the obvious Pop Smoke feature, which I think Zoo York in general is a very disappointing track. I thought 5Yo was pretty underwhelming on it as well. Pop Smoke, I mean, that was a great feature to unearth. You know, I thought that sounded great. That made that hit. And then Chef G, another Brooklyn drill artist, I thought he was hard as fuck on Wet 'Em Up Part 2. But yeah, like City on My Back and My City, like those are like good in the sense that that's TJ sticking to what we expect from him with that like auto crooner sound. Mm-hmm. All the other stuff, I mean, yeah, I don't know if we want to hear him on Axl Beats and literally trying to make a drill track. And again, like I said, he's made songs with 5Yo and Pop Smoke before. It's not that he hasn't dipped his toe into the other side of the city, but this just seemed kind of shallow this time around. And overall, I thought it was pretty underwhelming, pretty forgettable. And I think it's just kind of funny to hear TJ at 19 calling himself the King of New York, because it's just really obnoxious claim, honestly. And I don't know how serious he really takes it in his heart of hearts, but the energy he was bringing online, saying it, it seemed like he was into it. But yeah, it's kind of nonsense.
I don't hate him being bombastic and egotistic, like showing a huge ego like that. But yeah, definitely to back it up in this way is kind of embarrassing, I'd say. That's actually an interesting question. Who would you say does have that like King of New York rap right now for you?
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on how you define it, right? Like, is it in terms of heat right now, overall accomplishments? Because Jay-Z is like the true king, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's lots of other OGs like 50 Cent, Fab, that count in that regard too. Fat Joe. Nicki is weird because she's never really like been identified as a New York artist, but she's still really hot and still at the top of the game. So I always find it weird that we don't just default to her. To me, it's still A$AP Rocky. And I feel like he almost is getting underappreciated now. But it's been A$AP Rocky for me for a while. I think the like critics' choice would be like Joey Badass, but Joey isn't quite as mainstream at the top like A$AP is. So I think I'll go with Rocky. A lot of other people would say A Boogie is quote the hottest right now. For me, maybe if A Boogie really keeps his run going, he's expressed interest in slowing down his output and taking a step back from his, whirlwind career at this point. So maybe it depends, but A Boogie's probably doing the biggest numbers of anyone apart from 6ix9ine, but I feel like we kind of have to disqualify him if nobody in New York fucking like respects him. Like you just don't count. Like you don't actually rep New York. And it's funny, if Pop Smoke didn't die, I feel like he was like the default choice because he had universal approval and was already, getting bigger than New York itself. So yeah, for me, it's still A$AP Rocky.
Yeah, the first person that came to mind for me actually was Joey, I think. But A$AP, I think it makes logical sense, especially if you take out the OGs, like you said. Yeah, and it's kind of crazy that Pop Smoke was right there at such a young age. True, huge loss. Someone that I think similarly to Pop Smoke is very young and has this huge groundswell of support and excitement around her career is Lil Simz. It dropped Gray Area a couple of years back and talked
just last year.
Was it just last year? Jeez,
it was on your list, brother. Come on.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking, was it 2018 or 2019? But it was on my list. Love Gray Area. I've gone back to it quite a few times. And she dropped this EP, Drop 6, which is continuation of a run of EP she had in 2014, 2015. Drop 1, 2, 3, 4, that sort of thing. And these collection of songs, I believe it's about, I think it's only 6, really seem to be centered around what's going on right now in terms of the isolation and the quarantine. And she's even done some interviews kind of talking about how most of these songs are written now and inspired by that. So definitely a timely drop. Little Simz brought the heat on Gray Area. Did you feel like that heat continued on Drop 6, Dave?
Yeah, I did. Of these, I think 5 tracks, I really like 3 of them. Might Bang, Might Not, One Life, Might Live, and then You Should Call Mum. Tracks 1,
those
2,
are the 3.
4. I thought those were just like unimpeachable. Banger Little Simz tracks. They sound exactly like the best Little Simz tracks. Strong songwriting, really good flows, engaging production, kind of more of what we expect from her having achieved that new level last year with the Gray Area. And it's really cool that this still feels like a EP of the moment, as you said, with the obvious quarantine influence and lyrics relating to the sense of isolation and uneasiness that a lot of people are experiencing at this time. So for an EP, a short EP that was announced with basically no promotion, I think it really does leave a strong impression and just continues the, I think, growing esteem everyone has for Lil Simz once they listen to her. So
yeah,
and if I've said this before, but her English accent just like really hits, man. Some of the words she enunciates, they sound so much better because she's English.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the 3 songs you highlighted are the 3 that I also had written down. One Life Might Live is already on our Nowstalgia Best of 2020 playlist, was like an immediate ad for me. But she starts off the record on Might Bang, Might Not, saying, "Ain't seen no one like me since Lauryn Hill back in the 90s." Quite a claim. But I like how she's kind of picking this as like her lane, that she's gonna kind of take over this female hip hop like bellwether person that's just gonna kind of carry this forward. And honestly, everything she's putting out makes me think she could, I mean, that's a very lofty title, but could potentially get there. She, like you said, her songwriting is unimpeachable. She has a very like distinct but still like differential style within her work that I think she can kind of go between different sounds but still kind of keep this cohesiveness. And that's something we kind of talk about liking a lot with the artists that we review, is when they can keep this cohesion while also still being experimental. And you listen to a track like One Life Might Live, which just has this like awesome hook, but then a song like You Should Call Mum, which I feel like I really ride more for the verses and kind of what she's saying in that. And she just is a great young songwriter. She's only 26, and she is alluding to a bigger project that she's working on right now and trying to perfect before she drops. So very excited to see what comes from her. Check out this Lil Simz Drop 6. Dave, should people be checking out this new Bishop Nehru album, Nehruvia, my disregarded thoughts?
Uh, it's not the first place I'd point to you for Bishop Nehru music, but it has a lot of the qualities I think people that have listened to him before would like. But as a full length record, it's still kind of uneven for me. I think part of that's because he's putting kind of lofty expectations on it with this like 3-part structure and trying to make it really conceptual. So, he's still a conscious rapper that has really good technical ability. So if you like that, I think you can find things to like here. But I would defer more to some of his other projects.
Well, and the thing about Bishop was he was kind of picked out from an early age by Doom, right? As like this like next big thing, and has never really kind of had that drop yet that people have pointed to and been like, there it is. Like that's him putting it together. It's kind of been hit and miss here and there.
Yeah, I mean, he's 8 years in the game at this point, but still only 23. Like he has a ton of output, and he kind of represents the true sense of what an underground independent hip hop artist is these days. And despite that, he's obviously has this great long standing relationship with Doom, as you said, and also with Kaytranada. Doom and Kaytra produced the last album he made that we talked about. And, I think in this case, Bishop, I wouldn't say he's finding himself, but it's weird. He's almost like still getting those reps. Like I hear a song, I think my favorite song on this was one of the first singles. It's Too Lost, which is produced by DJ Premier. And that just reminds me of like 1999 era Joey Badass in terms of just traditional boom bap flows and production, which of course makes sense when it's produced by Premier. But then there's other songs where it's like more introspective, more eerie stuff. So I think there's a lot to like still, and he's never stopped being a really talented guy. But I think I'm just going to find myself listening to some of his older stuff. Funnily enough, too, he had a loose single, I believe, at the end of 2019 called Everything. And it was really threw me for a loop. I think it's a great track, but it's unlike anything else he's done. It's almost like a more like melodic, like not singy rap, but it's like a completely different flow than anything's ever done before. And I was expecting to hear more of that direction, but it seemed to have just been a one-off thing he tried. So it's not that I like that, though. I think his talent can change styles too. And we did see that with Joey and Flatbush Zombies and lots of other people, that people don't usually stay traditionalists forever. They will eventually want to continue to grow their sound. And I'm sure Bishop will get to that point at some point. But yeah, if you like, if you're about those bars, you can still get them on this.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because listening, there were a couple moments that I thought were pretty good. Meathead with MF Doom kind of stood out, but it's always like nice to hear Doom. Like a song like All of My Years, right? Which the way it's kind of like set up is there's like this like Chance the Rapper type sound to the beginning of it, and that kind of pulls through. And I was just like, I really enjoy hearing this, but I can't help but like want to listen to a Chance song. And then like another song I liked from him that was like Me and My Thoughts. I was listening to it and I was like, I mean, lyrically this is a great song, but I just find myself kind of fading out on it halfway through. And I feel like there's a lot of like good pieces in a lot of these songs or things that seem really interesting. Like there's, I think it's on Me and My Thoughts where he kind of uses a reverb on his voice and it goes really low and kind of like dark, and I thought that was a really interesting touch to it. And like if that was like a theme that I felt like popped out more throughout, maybe this record would feel a little bit more cohesive and a little bit more interesting. But the way it kind of jumped around from sound to sound and wasn't totally cohesive, even though it was kind of in 3 parts, I was just like I just felt like that maybe could have been cooked a little bit more, I guess.
Yeah, I agree.
But Bishop, I mean, I think you can see why he's been working since he was 15. Like he's obviously got great technical ability, just trying to really, I think, piece those ideas together in a way that's more palatable. Any songs off this you want to put on the playlist?
We already have Too Lost on there. I also like Little Susie Be Okay, but again, that's similar vibe. More traditional boom bap song. And I like Meathead as well with Doom.
Gotcha. Meathead I might throw on there. We'll see. But I'm wondering with this Hayley Williams album, the solo album that's dropping. We talked about After Laughter in 2017. I believe you actually had it on your top 10 list. If I'm,
I don't remember, but I remember I really liked Hard Times. I thought that song banged.
I go back to Fake Happy a lot. Honestly, the album's great. And I think what it did in terms of Paramore, which is this like 2000s band that really caught like the end of like the like emo angsty high school.
It was a pop punk band
phase. Yeah, pop punk and but like I feel like they brought more of that like popness to it. Instead, like it's funny because I think about Evanescence a lot when I think about early Paramore, only because they were like similar in terms of like a female lead and like really caught that popular sound, even though they weren't totally pop. But Paramore really shifted more into that 80s nostalgic vibe on After Laughter.
Yeah.
But it's been 3 years. Yeah, they're not really dropping new music right now, and Hayley seems to be focusing more on herself. And that brings us to Petals for Armor, her new album that dropped. And I kind of left this album of two minds. I think one, it's a little too much fat on this. I think it could have been cut down a bit, been a little bit more concise, and I felt like certain themes of it were played out in not the most interesting way by the end. So I was a little bit. I found myself zoning out a little bit.
15 tracks, that's a lot.
But I was a little bit. I was a little bit intrigued and impressed by Hayley's like direction that she's taking this, like the strength that I think comes through in her songwriting. And I think a couple of these songs really pop, and of course, if you can get a Boy Genius backing vocal on one of the tracks, you take it. So there's some stuff to like on here. Where were you left after finishing Petals for Armor?
Yeah, it is kind of funny to hear that post After Laughter, which in itself was a Paramore heel turn, we're then getting the first Hayley solo album, which is kind of funny because Hayley was always signed as a solo act. Then she made the band, But hearing another heel turn, right? Like Petals for Armor is, I mean, what kind of genre would you put this in? Like it's like singer songwriter music, but it does kind of hop around a lot. And I think the highlight, the key is the songwriting. And frankly, the vulnerability, the frankness that songwriting gives you, because Paramore, by being a pop punk band and kind of having that energy, you listen to their lyrics, they were ultimately a very sanitized, almost Christianized band. And that might have been part of the friction that bubbled up with the band and people leaving and rejoining and all that. And hearing Hayley, I think, really just kind of like let it all out and express herself without holding back at all was really refreshing to me. But it still kind of jumps around a lot, like with the sound. Like you're getting all these good themes, like just kind of more open femininity and anxiety and reconciling with her divorce from the Newfound Glory guy, and then you have like what Cinnamon sounds like, and then you have like Why You Creeping Around Here. Like it does jump around all over the place, So.
Well, yeah, it's funny because I think at the end, one of the songs that caught me because it really was so like poppy was Sugar on the Rim. And I was like, oh, wow, this song is so like just like catchy and like you kind of like smack it around in your mouth a little bit. But then the song I probably liked the most from the album is the first track, Simmer, which is just her like scathing and like her vocal performance and her emotional performance in that track is just so like exactly the title. It's like simmering underneath, like something's about to explode, but she's kind of holding it all in. And just like there's such a range on this album, like you kind of mentioned. It's fascinating to kind of see what's coming out. And I agree, the vulnerability on this, especially because she talks about having suicidal thoughts, having abusive parents growing up, going through, or I guess living in an abusive household. Seems like her mom was in a domestic violence situation. It seems like her divorce, so you mentioned, was a major player into this as well. So there's a lot of, I mean, she's very exposed on this, which I give her a ton of credit for. And it seems like she had a lot to pull from life-wise. You mentioned Cinnamon. That's one of the songs that stood out to me. Any others that you really liked or that you thought?
Yeah, I thought Creepin', that the hook is just catchy, but Sudden Desire jumped out to me. I like the way she builds to that chorus, but again, lyrically, talking about female lust in the open, not something we were going to get from Paramore proper. So that again, that's just kind of cool. I like Dead Horse. I like Crystal Clear. Simmer, as you said, is good. Cinnamon. It is cool to hear the Boy Genius backing vocals on Roses, Lotus, Violet Iris. Did not recognize those when I heard them. Read about that after the fact. But yeah, that's cool. And definitely in terms of like overqualified background vocals, kind of shows the clout Hayley has as a Atlantic Records artist. But she's only 31, but she's been in everyone's lives since she was like 15.
Yeah.
So honestly, really impressive. And she has talked about Paramore's gearing up for a new album, might get back to the roots a little bit. So that would be in turn another heel turn for what the music she's giving us. But yeah, it's pretty cool, honestly.
I'm trying to think of who her peers are. Like the only person that kind of comes to mind, especially after this album, is like Miley, kind of for me. Especially because Miley really moved out of that like pop young Hannah Montana lane, really did a heel turn. Now it's kind of gone back to a more traditional like singer-songwriter type realm.
There's been some anecdotes about when she befriended Taylor Swift way back in the day. Her and Taylor were kind of on equal footing in terms of like where they were in their respective scenes, and it's kind of funny to see. Obviously, Taylor Swift far surpassed Hayley in terms of star power, but yeah, like there's not a lot of like female rock or pop rock figures from the aughts that are still kind of active in a major way today. Like, would like Pink count? Like, I don't know.
I guess maybe, but Pink, I almost put in like a generation before her in some sense. Older. I'm trying to like, the interesting thing about it is like Paramore had such a hiatus, then came back, and then now Hayley's dropping the solo album. It almost feels a bit like Stevie Nicks-y in a way, but obviously the music is not comparable. In terms of quality, I would say Paramore I would never put on the same playing field as Fleetwood, but also I think in terms of like career arc, Stevie Nicks was, I think, a little bit older when she started making her solo albums. I don't know. It's hard. I can't really think of a comparison, but definitely excited to see what Hayley does next. She's talent.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to think about her collaborating with Boy Genius, even in an abbreviated way, because Boy Genius represents this kind of revival of female rockers that's been happening the past few years. We talked about Soccer Mommy earlier this year. There's really a lot of them now, but Hayley, represents that generation beforehand, even if she's only like 5-6 years older than some of these people. Yeah, but she's just so much more experienced. They've been around so much longer. So yeah, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Does Avril Lavigne count?
Well, I mean, Avril Lavigne, when was the last time we heard anything from her? And there's a huge conspiracy that Avril Lavigne is not actually Avril Lavigne. So, that's right. Definitely go read that on Reddit if you want a fun conspiracy, unlike all the other Reddit conspiracies out there right now. Hayley really captures this idea of like strong femininity through her vulnerability on that album. And another artist we're about to talk about, Kehlani, dropping her second album proper. This is her fourth like major project, really though. Also talks a lot about femininity and individualism on this album, as well as like isolation and distance and relationships. Her newest album, It Was Good Until It Wasn't, left me super impressed, and my Kehlani stock, I'm gonna buy as much as I can now because I feel like she's only gonna keep skyrocketing. And man, I gotta say, I just want to put it out there. It's already on our playlist, Grieving, with James Blake. It's up there in my top 10 songs of the year right now. Ooh. I think that track is just phenomenal, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But this was the vibe throughout. There's like this really light, airy sound throughout that Kehlani just kind of rides over, and this album fucking rocks, I think. How did you feel leaving it?
I liked it a lot. I'd say what stood out to me most of all, 5 Kehlani projects in, is that it seems to show a sense of maturity, sense of growth from Kehlani, despite the fact that she already had really mature subject matter and lyrics already. But in this case, post-pregnancy, having a child, post some public breakups and fallouts and beefs and things, I think Kehlani has just kind of taken herself to a new point in her career and how she's thinking about things. And I think that the Sonics actually were just kind of darker and moodier than her past work. Yet you're still getting this really intimate love song more often than not. And the fact that you can still make that work in a good way with, I think, songs you can take apart and listen to or just vibe with the whole album, again, speaks to the growth she's had. She's had a unique brand of R&B for some time, but she has just a way about the way she expresses these kind of cutting lyrics. I think of songs like Toxic on this, stood out, Grieving. Just there's something about the way she expressed herself that I always really gravitate to. And it's kind of cool reading about how she put this album out. This was supposed to come out back on April 24th, and her label, Atlantic, basically said, hey, you can put it out now if you want, but we're not really going to help you do a whole lot. So she had to do a lot of this DIY in terms of like videos and weird promo, which is just so strange to me that the label basically like gave her the bird in a certain sense. It's be like, hey, if you want to sacrifice your ability to promote this, then we're just not going to help you promote it at all. Like, I don't get that. But yeah, it's still sexy as shit, Yeah. That's Kehlani's vibe, man. I fuck with it.
Yeah, even the album cover we talked about before is like, I feel like it kind of matches the album very well in terms of it's kind of like seductive, and it's Kehlani from the back, shorter shorts, booty kind of hanging out the bottom. Obviously, like on a hot day, she's like a little sweaty or wet, but it is kind of like toned down in a sense. You think about what was it, 2017 Sweet Sexy Savage, and how that was like this like sunshiny, glittery, up
much more poppy
record. And this almost feels like she's kind of falling into like this traditional R&B sound while keeping, I think, some of that Kehlani uniqueness. And I think that speaks to the maturity you're talking about, where she's kind of making these songs that are timeless in a sense. Like there's no people name, there's really no references to specifics, but just kind of like these overall messages about relationships, what helps them work, what doesn't, what do you feel when they fall apart. And I think that's what Kehlani does so well. You already mentioned Toxic, which I think is one of the best songs off here, but a song like F and MU really stood out to me. I thought there was one song, it might have even been, on Toxic, like the way that the 808s and the chimes kind of overlay throughout. I loved how like she used some pretty creative beats and ways of kind of structuring these songs that felt, still interesting, but you kind of just find yourself vibing throughout this whole record. And it's funny, I think Grieving stood out so much to me as a song because I really found myself like almost like melting into the song. And then when Kehlani comes back in to kind of pair up with James Blake at the end, I like literally jumped twice because she comes in so strongly. It like my heart like skipped a beat because James Blake had lulled me so much into like this like trance. It was crazy. Yeah. I thought that song was really well constructed.
That's funny. Yeah, definitely. Serial Lover really stood out to me. I thought that like the post chorus, I got bodies I'm gonna take to the grave, I got girls I want to give my last name, just incredibly catchy. And that's kind of always been her vibe, is she has this it's not like boilerplate stuff. And that was kind of the biggest criticism of Sweet Sexy Savage, was that Kehlani almost just leaned into the more typical mainstream pop stuff for that debut, when in reality that's not what she's actually best at. It's more about this sultry at surprisingly deep R&B.
Yep.
So
Sultry.
this is really good.
Good word, Dave. Sultry. Check out Kehlani's It Was Good Until It Wasn't, and also check out our Nowstalgia Best of 2020 playlist, which has songs from all these artists except for Lil Tjay, because that album sucked. Let's start, though, with some TV, Dave, and let's also talk about our guy, Mark Ruffalo. They knew Tommy. It's interesting. So you think about Mark Ruffalo's career over the last couple of years, right? He did Dark Water.
Waters.
He's doing this Dark Waters. Sorry. He's doing this album. He did Spotlight. He's done some really really heavy like
Foxcatcher, another one.
Foxcatcher, exposing issues around mental health, government, doing terrible things, I guess we'll just say. And then he's also the Hulk. He's Bruce Banner, So there's like this kind of stark contrast between him like getting that bag and like doing the things that he's passionate about. He's obviously a very thoughtful guy, very activist, and I give him a lot of credit for following the things that he cares about and using his work to prop those issues up. Watching, I know this much is true, his new HBO show where he plays twin brothers, one who is schizophrenic and the other who is kind of like the linchpin of this family, holding things together, but obviously also very troubled by his family's history. I found myself kind of wanting Mark Ruffalo to take a step back and do something a little bit more fun, because it might be the situation we're in, and this dropping during a very heavy time for a lot of people in general. But I found this 1 hour to be a very tough watch, a very tough hang, this show. Did you feel similar?
Yeah, it's just exhausting subject matter. And by all accounts, that's just the way that story goes. And for shows like that, they're largely designed around their star, and they're just a vehicle to showcase good acting and hopefully pursue awards. In the case of HBO, a limited series, I think Mark's chances are strong in that camp. But it just, I don't know if it's going to be a fun time, even abbreviated to 6 hours. So it's, I would not begrudge anyone if they were like, yeah, I'm just not feeling that at this time. And I don't even know if I don't think it's bad. It just happens to be, what it's about might not be super engaging to a lot of people right now. But I mean, Mark Ruffalo is a great actor, and I think he is giving two pretty distinct performances as these brothers already, showing a lot of pent-up rage as the one brother, and then obviously playing someone with a mental illness naturally lends itself to a different sort of range. So, yeah, it's for me, I'm almost a little biased too, because I found it more engaging because this was shot in and around my hometown. So that I'm recognizing locales, and I know we're going to get some flashback scenes once the Italian manuscript becomes a framing device. When we're going back in time, that was literally filmed in Poughkeepsie. So I'm just going to be looking for things I recognize, like seeing the Mid-Hudson Bridge pretty obviously in those tracking shots in the first episode. So that's cool, I guess, for me. But yeah, in terms of the story, I'm like, well, nice to see Catherine Hahn.
Yeah.
I always like her, Juliette Lewis, good too.
Yeah, Juliette Lewis was the one I was probably most excited to see, because Catherine Hahn, I think, has been a little bit more in vogue recently. She had the HBO show, and we are both tuned into The Ringer, and they've been standing her, I think, since they talked about Step Brothers on the Rewatchables. But I would seeing Juliette Lewis and seeing her kind of play this very like on edge, like translator person who obviously has their own mental health issues. I think that was the part where I just was like, oh wow, the show is going to be super exhausting to watch. And I agree. I think the acting overall is pretty good. The performances are good, but like just thinking about what happens in the first episode, first 5 minutes, the brother who has schizophrenia cuts his right hand off or his left hand off, I can't remember which one, in a public place, and then the other brother has to come and make the decision if he should put the hand back on. There's allusions to abuse towards children, them as children from the stepfather growing up, or at least towards the boy who's schizophrenic. Mom gets cancer. he goes to have this transcript made as a gift to her, and then this person also seems to be having mental health issues. And then he has to chase his brother across the highway. I mean, like, it's tough. Like, it's like one heavy thing after another after another. And like the final scene with him and his, I guess, ex-wife or estranged wife at this point, and that ends in a way that's just super heavy. I just was like, ooh, like emotional low at the end of this episode.
Yeah.
And I don't know the story, so I'm not sure how many emotional highs are coming. That's my worry.
I don't know it either. I know this book was from I think the 90s. It was Oprah Winfrey's book club. Really blew it up. Rosie O'Donnell is going to be coming into the show as the social worker. I saw a lot of love for that performance from her, so that's cool, I guess. But to that point, there's illusions of abuse to come from that medical, quote unquote, medical facility that the brother has been assigned. So, yeah, it doesn't sound like it's going to be the funnest time. 6 hours only, though, I guess is enough for me to finish, of course. But yeah, that's a lukewarm endorsement. Let's put it that way.
I think I'm gonna hold Betty on reserve to watch right after the show. It's
it's a good idea.
I can just relax after watching. Why don't we talk about Ryan Murphy's newest show, Hollywood, on Netflix? Ryan Murphy, being the creator of a lot of FX shows and other very famous shows on Fox, like Glee, American Horror Story, People vs. OJ,
Pose.
People vs. series, Pose. Very famous creator. Now signed a deal with Netflix to produce some shows. We talked about The Politician. Now his second show, Hollywood, talking about Hollywood in the 1950s. This fictionalized story about a bunch of, I guess we'll say, outcasts in the society then, mostly outcasts in that society then, trying to make it big and kind of centering around the script about Peg. What's her last name? Something Whistle. Entwistle, is that right?
Something like that, yeah.
And
who jumped off the Hollywood sign, real story.
Very famous story. And I found this show to be pretty fun, but just I think where it kind of ended up just left me be like, I thought the show was going to go in a very different direction, and kind of disappointed with where it ended. How did you feel with this mini series by Ryan Murphy?
Yeah, so I enjoyed Hollywood a lot. I thought it was pretty fun the whole time. There's some things that stand out pretty clearly, like strong attention to period detail, wide range, strong cast, as one expects from a Ryan Murphy production, and generally just kind of a fun time and just going through the story. But and I definitely like it a lot more than The Politician, which I thought just had a lot of flaws that prevented it from being successful. I think Hollywood, for what it's trying to do, is successful, but it still has a lot of like the things that hold it back that we expect from lesser Ryan Murphy shows. Namely that it just kind of lacks a lot of subtlety, and it jumps around in tone enough, yet doesn't almost commit to jumping around in tone enough. Like it's, and somehow there's not enough conflict in this story. So like there's some faults for sure, and it might be a little self-congratulatory with this kind of obvious alt history presenting a so warm message about inclusion and representation. I still had a good time. I think some of the performances really stood out. So I liked it. Only 7 episodes, kind of an interesting pace because it starts off with a 2-part pilot, right? And you almost feel like you're building up to something. It really starts out strong, but then it kind of fizzles at the end where it gets a little more predictable and maybe doesn't quite hit as hard as it hoped it would. But I still enjoyed it.
Yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. I think where the show really excels is the way that it kind of it uses this time period, which I believe is very beloved, and there's a lot of affection for it, and it puts people as fictionalized versions of real people. You have Rock Hudson appearing in
Mm-hmm.
this. You have the woman from McDaniel from Gone with the Wind,
Hattie McDaniel.
Hattie McDaniel.
Mm-hmm.
You have Henry Wilson, played
Mm-hmm.
by Jim Parsons, which I want to talk about in a second, how you felt about that performance. And then you have these people who are kind of like you know, real fictional characters who are just kind of playing an avatar for people during that time who went through similar things. And I think it really like weaves that in and out very well to tell this story about what Hollywood was like, kind of this like dark, seedy underbelly, and how some of these inner workings probably actually went during that time, so people could get by or could make money or could get these opportunities with these studio heads. And I think that's all interesting, as well as really exposing the things that aren't talked about as much, like the culture of gay men and gay people in Hollywood
Mm-hmm.
at that time, and kind of how they had to keep that a secret. I think the place I found myself to be most I think disappointed, and I guess this might be a good place to jump off, is you talked about the lack of conflict in this. And when you have all these marginalized people, you know, you have black people, gay black people in this story,
Mm-hmm.
who face such little uh, discrimination, I would say, or the lack of discrimination that they face. It felt very unrealistic in a lot of
Yeah, that's
senses.
that. I mean, so much of it's just really implausible at the end of the
Right.
day.
I mean, the Oscars that year is way more diverse than any Oscars I think we've ever had.
Yeah, and that's the 1948 Oscars on the show.
Right. Just pretty. I mean, the one scene, I guess there's two scenes. There's the burning the cross on the front lawn of everybody's making the movie, making Meg, and then there's them spitting at the car when um, the actress and the director are driving
Mm-hmm.
in. Darren Criss and I forgot what the
Laura
actress's
Harrier,
name is.
Camille, and
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes. When they were driving in. That's like the only two scenes where you really see that. And I guess there's some scenes when at the Oscars people are booing and not taking
Mm-hmm.
pictures because Rock Hudson and the writer are on the red carpet together. And
Yep.
but other than that, Jim Parsons is pretty emotionally abusive as Henry Wilson throughout, and that's some tough stuff. But it just kind of left me feeling like everything's gonna work out, and just feeling. I honestly thought it was gonna end up where the movie flops or it doesn't hit, and like everything kind of falls apart. But they're just applauded for the attempt.
Yeah, right.
But
I mean, and that was kind of interesting too, because they kind of set up Samara Weaving's character Claire to be this like rival figure for Camille.
Yep.
And she's the blonde white woman, the daughter of the studio head. Of course, she'll get the role and not the more deserving, but happens to be black actor, right? But no, like Camille gets the role, and then Claire is really supportive and nice, and actually gets her best scenes after that. Like it's like almost like a false start in terms of setting up some kind of heads to butt. And like, you know, Rock Hudson I think is an interesting character here, because I mean so much of it is with regard to Henry Wilson. We'll get to that, but I mean it's very different from the Rock Hudson I think people know, because he was truly a star, and in this story he's kind of just bumbling into like bit parts and kind of an ass actor. So that's kind of amusing. But like again, like Rob Reiner, he plays Ace, you know, the head of Ace Studios, which is like our stand-in for Paramount, and he's set up to be this like, you know, casting couch, old school, like dipshit, and then he kind of gets redeemed at the end right before he dies, and I was like, oh, also didn't see this coming. Kind of weird. But then it's like, oh well, the legal people that they lead the film, they burned it. You know, the reels are gone. There it is, and then they immediately resolve that right away. Yep. They just never kept a conflict going, because even Henry Wilson takes turns, you know, like helping them out. Remember when he kills the story about Avis's thing with the tabloids, and like he's doing actually good things for everyone half the time, even if he's a dipshit. So it's like there just never was a consistent source of conflict, which I think makes the lack of resistance to certain obvious taboos of the time even more obvious. Like the fact that Camille and Raymond were in an interracial relationship during the Hays Code. They acknowledge the Hays Code on this show, yet it never comes up that they happen to be dating a white person and a black person. Like that doesn't come up at all on the show when they're talking about the problems they're going to face. So it's like it kind of picked and choose what it wanted to go into, but I still had a good time because I think a lot of the performances I really liked. I think Dylan McDermott as Ernie, who that's based off Scotty Bowers, who's a very interesting figure to look into. He plays basically the pimp at the gas station. But he was just really, really charming the whole time. And I also really liked Joe Mantello, who plays Dick Samuels at Ace Studios. And also Holland Taylor as Ellen Kincaid. I thought they really kind of grounded everything because we kind of float in and out of the actors and the writers' lives throughout. So it's still a lot of fun, but you can definitely poke holes in it like a lot of Murphy shows.
No, I thought it was definitely a good time. It's a movie, or it's a seven part movie. No, it's a 7 episode show. It goes by quick. And honestly, we're sitting here with a critical eye. I've had a couple people who've watched in my life that really just enjoyed the ending and like that it was a happy ending, and it actually kind of telegraphs that in a way, right? Because they have the original right of the script and it's going to end in tragedy, and then they kind of say, well, we can't have a black woman who jumps off this building, because what does that show to all the other black people who do watch this? So it kind of does end up with that like overcoming story at the end, which is kind of an interesting thing too, that they kind of set that up. I don't know what Murphy's doing next, but I find the choices he's made for Netflix very interesting, and I'm looking forward to it. And I mean, if he's going to be getting like Rob Reiner in like a shows up in 3 episode type thing, I mean, how could you not be tuning into these shows at this point, in my opinion?
Oh, of course. And I mean, they really spared no expense to recreate post-war golden age Hollywood. Great. It looked awesome. And I mean, I think the ending's a little hokey, but I still enjoyed it. I started watching some Oscar speeches afterwards, to be completely honest. Like it was, I was feeling good, no doubt. Yeah. And I liked, I really liked Laura Harrier as Camille as well. She's been someone I've kind of been watching, since Spider-Man Homecoming, and she was in the Fahrenheit 451 thing for HBO, but all her scenes were cut, if I remember right. So like I've been waiting for her to have another like big role.
Yeah, and she was good.
She was good in this. Like all Murphy shows, there's a lot of frequent collaborators: McDermott, Darren Criss, etc. Did you like and David Cornsweet, who was in Politician as a River? He played Jack in this. I think for Jack, I really liked his role in kind of setting the story going, and he's probably strongest in those first 2 episodes when he's setting the table for everything. I think maybe the presence of his wife, who obviously leaves him at the end, that almost like was unnecessary. Like she was just so underwritten and unnecessary. And yet all the other female characters in the show were really well written. So it just kind of felt like a superfluous add-on they maybe couldn't fix. I don't know. But I like that presence as well. But yeah, I mean, tell me, how are you feeling about Jim Parsons as Henry Wilson? Definitely almost leaning into the stereotype that is like a more like a predatory gay person. Yeah, it's coming, of course, from Parsons and Murphy, 2 gay men. So I guess you can let that go. But yeah, the tonal shifts are largely from Parsons' performance, scene to scene. Yes. So I guess it depends how that hits for you, whether you enjoy it or not.
Yeah, it's just, and this is no fault of Parsons. When you've played a character who has become so much a part of the culture, for good and for bad. Some people love Big Bang Theory, and a lot of people do not love Big Bang Theory. To then see him playing this extremely different role where he's so cynical and, like you mentioned, abusive, and really profiting off of his abuse and off of his power. It's just it was tough for me at times, and I felt like Parsons gave his best performances near the end, like when he was kind of like this crazed like producer trying to get credit, and then feeling like he was like scorned but kind of coming around. I felt like that was when I believed him the most, when he was like dancing around with Rock Hudson in his apartment or whatever, or his house, I was like, this is like where this role feels like it's kind of losing it for me a little bit. Just feels like Parsons is hamming this up now. So I don't know. My mileage varied on it, but I was wondering how you felt. Like, can you separate Parsons from that Sheldon? I don't even know Sheldon's last name.
I don't know Sheldon's either.
I just know Sheldon.
Yeah, Sheldon. Which is still, as you said, still in the consciousness. Young Sheldon, still a big hit for CBS. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that in terms of like believability, but it's just kind of funny seeing him like really go for it, and then you have Rock Hudson just kind of playing it straight the whole time.
Yeah.
So, but on the other hand, sometimes he would liven it up more than anyone else around him. So I wonder what the show would have been like if everyone else was kind of on that wavelength as well. And I don't know, but yeah, I didn't mind it, but I definitely noticed it. So maybe that, I don't know if that matters, but it stood out.
Did you feel like Murphy was trying to say something by, Jack and Rock Hudson both being played as these like very dopey, almost like idiotic, stupid characters? Like they were both pretty thick, I guess might be a good way to put it in the head.
Yeah, that's interesting because along those lines, I was expecting Jack to not like have the happy ending, but he does. Mm-hmm. He's in the hit movie. He's part of the it couple, and it's kind of all setting it up. It's like, oh, here's Jack. Well, Jack's this really handsome, straight white guy. He's already married, and maybe the wife thing won't work out, but Jack's fine. But like, it almost wasn't cutting enough. Yeah, like in terms of what I was trying to say, and that's okay. Again, it was enjoyable, but yeah, it's funny. There's actually a lot to chew on with this show. Only 7 episodes.
Yeah, definitely. Check out Hollywood on Netflix. 7 episodes, pretty good. Normal People on Hulu, getting a lot of buzz recently. Dave and I watched the whole series, and mate, I got some mixed feelings about this series.
Whoa.
I want to see kind of where you're at with it. I'm gonna say it's a well done series and it's pretty good. And I was invested in these characters. Mm-hmm. I left with so many questions throughout, and just kind of like feeling like some of these character choices and things that they did. Maybe it's because I was upset with them, or maybe it's because I don't think they're totally logical, and maybe that fits for the characters, but I was a little bit frustrated with some of the directions the show went. How are you feeling about Normal People though?
Wow, interesting. I really love the show. This is one of my favorite shows of the year. I thought it was incredibly affecting, and as you said, you really get invested in this story. It's a young adult series that's portraying young romance, yet it's still done really smartly. Along that line, it also happens to be really erotic and sensual in a honestly just incredibly impressive way, the way it's done. But yeah, I thought this was great. I was trying to stop myself from watching it so fast because I just immediately got invested in the way they were telling the story, and the leads had just sparkling chemistry from the jump that I think it's a total success. But yeah, I mean, what are these issues that Connell and Marianne couldn't solve for you? What's going on here?
Well, it's a lot of it has to do with the ending, but also just like the way that a lot of the conflict develops, right? Is a circumstance happens in one of their lives that pushes them possibly in a different direction, and they just never fucking talk to each other, man. It's so aggravating. Like, okay, so I don't really know the logistics of Ireland, but they're going to Trinity, which is this very well respected school in Dublin. It seems like it's maybe like an hour away from their hometown.
I looked it up. I think it's a little farther than that, but yeah.
Okay.
They're from Sligo, which is like on the other side of Ireland. If you go west, I think. I was looking at the map because I was curious what that train route they were using.
Right. So he's like, oh, I don't have a job, so I can't pay my rent, so I have to move back home for the summer, which is like 2 months, maybe 3 months, that he has to be away. And she's
It's a
like,
two and a
oh,
half hour drive.
okay, 2.5 hour drive.
Damn, I know it's small.
Yeah. And she's like, oh, okay, well, and he's like, I guess we got to break up then. And she's like, I guess we do. And then they break up. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like, didn't one of you say like, maybe we try long distance for the summer, or maybe we just try to go every other week? Like, there's never any like talk of them like, oh, maybe we should try to figure things out. It's always just like, nope, we're broken up. See you later. Go do your thing.
Right.
Marianne's like, I'm gonna run back to this other guy, and Connell's like, I'm gonna go be depressed. Like, it's very frustrating in that sense. And they're smart people, obviously.
Yeah, of course, of course. So yeah, I definitely had that thought too when I'm watching it. I'm like, what happened here? Then I think as you watch it more, it came into focus for me, because when Marianne and Connell have that ice cream chat in Italy, gelato chat, Marianne's like, oh yeah, we never really talked about this, right? And that's on the topic of the big wealth disparity, class disparity between their two upbringings, their two families. And it kind of highlights that Connell was always really uncomfortable with his class, and that had, that had kind of been portrayed throughout the show as throughout things happens, and Connell just wasn't able to ask for that. And that's still, obviously it's still an annoying trait, but that's just who the Connell is, right? Like he struggled with that. It was something that Marianne didn't really notice. And on the one hand, I really like that as just kind of the framing of how we get introduced to these characters, right? You have Connell, the popular kid who's working class. You have Marianne, the outcast who's really wealthy. And then obviously that gets flipped later on when they go to Trinity, right? But the conversations they have later on, I think, let me forgive that. But you're right. If they were better communicators, maybe if they were a little more mature, some of their issues wouldn't happen. But I think that's why it's honestly so effective, because you understand still why they had these issues. Right. And, I think it's just done really well.
I was also a little bit frustrated with the ending, because I feel like it's a similar type of thing, right? Like, Marianne's life has become a lot of like what Connell's life is. Like, she goes to holidays with his family. She spends a lot of time with him at school, even though she's developing her own friend group, and she's finishing up her degree as he's, finishing up a year before her, it seems. And he's going to New York, and she's just like, you got to go. You got to follow this opportunity, which he doesn't even seem totally like he really wants to do. He's kind of like, yeah, I guess I could.
Me in New York City? Can't even walk down Dublin without tripping on myself.
And then she basically like makes him say he's gonna go, and then she's like, yeah, but I'm not going. And I'm like, well, why? Like, you again, try long distance for 1 year and see where you're at. You're gonna graduate, maybe you get into a college over there. You like your life over here. What is your life? This one friend who you watch movies with at night? That's all that's been established as your life, outside of you doing the things Connell does. That part also frustrating.
That was the thing. I was like, she's like, well, I'm really comfortable and happy with my life here. And I'm like, well, what do you mean by that? Because I get it. Like, we get it. It's well established that Marianne was pretty fucked up, right? And having a hard time coming to grips with who she was, and like being valued and appreciated by people around her, right? Like, she went through a lot. And I think the Sweden scenes really go through that. And a lot of that shit's really tough to watch. But yeah, just they're almost like letting each other go, and they both helped each other get to a better spot in their lives. Obviously, Connell gets through a big bout of depression when his friend dies, right? Like, so it's like you understand it, but like you're so invested, and you're like, but wait, you don't have to do it this way. I think that's why it's so great, because you were that invested in these stories. And I think the chemistry between Daisy Edgar Jones and Paul Mescal is just so strong from the jump that like they just really sell everything.
No, totally. And that's the thing, is that this is a well done show, and I think they actually touch on a lot of topics and build out these characters in ways that make sense. I'm just frustrated that some of the decision making wasn't fleshed out a little bit more. These conversations weren't had, because I think very easily it could have come up where, like, Marianne's like, well, I got this opportunity or this internship for the summer, so I can't go back home, or I'm going to do this thing, so maybe that doesn't make sense for us to stay together right now. That would have made it feel a little bit better for me. But I do agree with what you're saying. I think the way that they handle the suicide of Connell's friend and his depression and connection with therapy afterwards is actually really, really well done. I think the way that they kind of show Marianne's arc around her family and how that's kind of led to this idea of like what she deserves in relationships, especially relationships with men, is really well done. And kind of the way that she goes from Connell, who it treats her like shit, but in a not so I don't know, flamboyant way, not so obvious way, and to
unknowingly
being more
usually
and more, right, to it being more and more abusive, and her almost wanting the pain, feeling like she deserves the pain, is such a well done, built out character. And yeah, I think they really sell you on this relationship. I was rooting for them the whole time, and it was so frustrating when they weren't fucking together. I just wanted them to figure it out. So it leaves me frustrated. One thing I know we've joked about, I wanted to just bring up to be on the record.
Yeah. We got no. This is an important point. I think go into it.
Okay. So this is a trope that's in a lot of things, but Daisy Edgar Jones is gorgeous. Like, she is absolutely stunning. Anne Hathaway lookalike to me, just like totally beautiful. And they set her up as like the rich girl who's alone, weird, and like kind of ugly. And then she like does her bangs a little differently, puts on a tight black dress, and goes out. And they're like, oh my God, like you aren't that ugly anymore.
Marianne, what'd you do here? Something new? I'll be doing you a favor to sleep with you. And it's like, you sure about that, buddy?
Yeah, right. You're this ugly like guy from the UK, and this is like a 10 in like every respect of the word. And man, I just like could not get over that, because like she goes on to have these like douchey boyfriends throughout, and people are like, oh, what was she like in high school? And she's like, oh, she didn't have any friends, like no one even really wanted to bother with her. I'm like, I don't get why. Like, I feel like any guy that saw this girl in high school would be like, will you go out with me? Like,
yeah, I think that's one piece of criticism that I've seen from fans of the book, and this is obviously adapted from Sally Rooney, her second novel. It's a very new novel. Sally Rooney is a really fast rising star in the modern literary scene. I think she's 29 now, two hit novels in. They're already developing the same team, Lenny Abramson and crew, where they're developing A Conversation with Friends as well to be a show. So people that are fans of Normal People, the book, I think between the internal monologue of Marianne and just, the way books are different, it seems to be made more clear that that is actually Marianne's circumstance. But now that we have Daisy Edgar Jones in our mind when we think of Marianne, it's a little bit of a walk. But yeah, obviously I'm letting it go. But it was just really funny. It's like the whole time I was like, oh well, because she wears her hair in a braid. It's like,
right.
It's like she's like, what? Are you serious? Just kind of funny.
Just totally blew my mind. Fionn O'Shea played Jamie. Him and Sandy, my least favorite characters I've watched on television this year. Sandy from Plot Against America. Both of them can kick rocks. And at least Sandy was like somewhat redeemable. Yeah. Fionn O'Shea as Jamie is just like a total god, dude. I
mean, in Sandy's case, Sandy was like, what, 14? He's like a little shit kid, doesn't know any better. You can forgive a lot of it, right? But yeah, Jamie in Normal People is just completely detestable the entire time. Despicable. Like from the start where he's like putting the moves on Marianne when she's still with Connell. He's like touching her leg and stuff and be like, oh, you right for him? And it's like, dude, you're just being a creep. Like, what the hell? And then, oh man, like the conversations he has when he's just like this classist dipshit in Italy. And like he's like, the Guggenheim, it's so overrated. And it's like, what? Do you just not now understand how snobby you sound when you talk like that? So it's kind of funny just how one note his character was, because most arcs of the show are so well written and full of depth, and Jamie was anything but.
Right. Yeah, Jamie, especially when Connell's like, yeah, God forbid you're around some Asian people, huh, Jamie? And he's just like, just looking at him with his like full glass of wine. Then he like overflows it and throws it down. I was like, get this guy off the show. Like, I literally can't stand him for another second. Right. Obviously, well played, because that's the character. But damn.
And I think in a sense, Jamie almost is more important in like writing and like fleshing out Connell than Marianne, because like for Marianne, it's part of like the way she's just going through this thing where she wants to she's valued by feeling devalued by her partners and stuff, right? But for Connell, it's like, well, Connell is being written as this thoughtful jock figure, right? He's almost like an internet boyfriend trope where it's like, oh, well,
Noah
he's
Centineo.
Yeah, well, but that's the thing though. Noah Centineo is like presents as kind of dumb hot guy, whereas Paul Mescal is like, yeah, I'm rugby star or Irish football star who also reads and writes real good. You know, I could have kicked your brother's ass after he hit you, but I didn't. I just threatened him. You know, I could have wiped the floor with Jamie, who's obviously scared of me and intimidated by me, but I didn't. You know, so ultimately, I feel like the show becomes more of a Paul Mescal vehicle, than Daisy Edgar Jones, and that starts kind of early on, right? Because when they have their conflict, where in the beginning, where Connell basically like doesn't ask Marianne out to like the prom or whatever, and makes her feel really bad, and they split, and then from that point we follow Connell still taken into Trinity, and we don't see Marianne again until they reconnect at Trinity at this party, and like she's the social butterfly and she's wearing her hair down and she looks amazing because, spoiler, she's actually a really attractive woman. And like I really like that choice though of how they actually followed Connell. They followed the perpetrator of this conflict,
right?
And kind of stuck with Connell a lot throughout. And Paul Mescal, I believe this is like his first main role. He's been primarily a stage actor to this point. Both him and Daisy Edgar Jones are just superstars now, man. They are incredibly famous like that, and it's been kind of cool to see and hearing them talk about how it's been wild for them. But it's justly earned, because I think they're both tremendous actors and perfectly cast.
One last thing I just wanted to shout out. I think the way that they portray consensual sex in this show is really well done, and like it's never like made weird. I know, like, as someone who in my role in my job, I have to have these conversations for like Title IX trainings and things like that, in terms of like having consent throughout the act and things like that. They display that really well, especially in like the last scene where you really see them doing it, and Marianne asks Connell to hit her, and he's like, oh no, I don't want to do that. And like kind of seeing that play out, not only I think the psychology of it kind of it comes into play, and you know, him being like, you know, her be like, do you like when I say that thing, or how does that make you feel, to then him saying I don't want to do that, is just really I thought well written, well done, well displayed. So I want to give him kudos for that. And
you know, I mean, the overall presence of intimacy coordinators on productions these days, that's the norm now, and obviously that's really great. But like, despite the fact that we're getting this, you know, really by the book, the way it should be done sex, right? They're wearing condoms. He's saying he'll stop if it hurts. All those great things that you should be doing. You're actually seeing that portrayed, and it's not stopping away from the fact that the sex scenes you're watching are really hot.
Yeah,
and they're shot really well, still tastefully, yet really sensually as well. So that I think that's kind of like that's the lightning rod part of the show, right? That gets a lot of attention. But it's done a lot better than just about any other sex scenes I've seen in a long time. So
totally agree. That's
I think also an important note. Also, shout out Connell's email. He goes from Hotmail to Gmail completely unexplained during the show. Definitely a big plot hole. There was a Frank Ocean Nikes drop at one point that I really appreciated. And I also wanted to shout out the Italy scene where they're riding bikes, and Sufjan Stevens' Mystery of Love does not play, because this was not, in fact, Call Me By Your Name. So that made me sad, but I just listened to that song 10 times over the weekend, so it's all good.
What a great song. Dave, what do the people got to watch, listen to, or consume for next week's pod?
We got The End of the Last Dance, the Michael Jordan doc on ESPN. We have Survivors, Season 40, Winners at War finale on Wednesday. We'll be talking about that. A little late, obviously, but I'm happy to get into that. That'll be fun. Charlie XCX is dropping her Quarantine album on Friday. And Moses Subney is dropping the second part of his album, Gray. We talked about the first part earlier in the year. And also on Tuesday, so by the time you're hearing this, in all likelihood, it'll be out on VOD, Josh Trank's return with Capone, starring Tom Hardy and Linda Cardellini. Just, I think, morbid curiosity from just all film fans on what the hell this movie is like. Used to be called Fonzo, now it's called Capone. Here it is. We'll be talking about it.
We'll see. Again, follow us at NowstalgiaPod on Twitter, SoundCloud.com/NowstalgiaPod, and YouTube.com/NowstalgiaPod. Stay safe out there. Wear a mask. Social distance. Later.